The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 9. Man and Shaman. Chapter 1. The Feminine Conception of Freedom. The foregoing analysis will have defined the way in which this subject is approached in this essay, and the reasons that have necessitated its discussion. It is impossible today to discuss feminism intelligently without discussing sex inversion. Similarly, 1. The disintegration of the family unit, 2. The cult of the child, 3. Doctrinaire dilettantism, 4. The war on the intellect. All these subjects are intimately connected with it. If you discuss one with any thoroughness, you are compelled to discuss the others. That the present widespread invert fashion is not an Oscar Wildism, or the excrescence of a dilettante sex snobbery only, is certain, although such elements are to be found in it and are part of its conspicuous advertisement. It is much more an instinctive capitulation of the will on the part of the ruling male sex. It is much more a political phenomenon than anything else. 2. Its sensual character, although it is from that angle that it is popularly viewed, of course, is insignificant. Shamanization, and the effecting of inversion by a great number of people not physiologically abnormal, is a social device to gain freedom, that new type of freedom which at the opening of our argument an attempt was made to define. It is as much one of the classes of the complex phenomenon of revolution as is feminism or a wage conflict. It might properly be allocated under the heading minors, or the still wider heading education, though in practice it stretches into the ripest manhood, or deepest old age. The commutative nature of freedom and irresponsibility in what I have called the feminine conception of freedom, which is the type of freedom which is gradually substituting itself today with the European for the masculine, which circumstances have almost compelled him to discard, that is the true key to this great movement throughout Europe. And it is a law that, if left alone, or sufficiently supported by the intricacies of civilization, an individual invariably tends to evade any position of burdensome trust, or indeed any position at all. A receipt for such evasion can be the most popular of social specifics. Sex inversion for the male is such a receipt. All normal human effort or competitive ambition has for its end to place you in a position of power or prestige. If you succeed, you consequently find yourself in a position of responsibility. You are also in the male category of initiative at once. But all popular social revolution must be against a superior in power or fortune, and it is even directly aimed at terminating the control exercised over the life and action of the insurrected. If you trace the operations of authority and control, you will find that wherever these exist at the present time, the social organism is agitated at that point. The father is the emblem of authority, the idea of the family is universally attacked. Control is exercised in the family over the women, children, and dependents. All these functionaries have their banner and class in social revolution. Then the man on the score of his sex had certain privileges. Chivalry outweighed these in some cases. But there was the material for an insurrection. The warder and prison governor is an authority over the convict, and the schoolmaster or the nurse over the child. So every imaginable form of authority is ferreted out. Separated from its physical peculiarities, disincarnate, and in its form of social impulse, if we can imagine it so, before it had been furnished with the particular body it at present has, male sex inversion can be regarded, I believe, as the prognostication of a deep revolution in the European character. The bold, adventurous, independent, but uncreative European of the past, dies with this fashion, perhaps, and may, it is to be hoped, be reborn after it as another creature, in short, more what the Asiatic is. This burst of childhood also, the child cult which is associated in our time with these fashions, may be the last senile burst of the old European spirit, the immature, over-physical European who carried on the Roman Empire. Taken purely as a phenomenon of revolutionary anti-authority, it is most obviously linked to the obsession of childhood, which stretches right through it and into every department of life. The two chief orders of authority are the principles of natural superiority specified above, on the one hand, of a natural gift of strength, intelligence, daring, or what not, and the organized power of numbers, or any authority established in defiance of and not in complicity with natural laws, on the other. All anti-authority is of this second order. It is this that more and more has reigned, until the point of chaos has been reached. It is this that, through the vehicle of all this group of subversive fashions, is breaking itself. And it is breaking itself in the belief that it is breaking the other order of authority. There is no fashion which bears in itself the seeds of a new dispensation in which the true and natural order of power will be revived and reinstated as the unnatural fashion we have just been discussing. The educational and press encouragement for the mood favorable to the development of such fashions is very striking. And indeed there is little trouble in showing even the obtusest person how his happiness may really lie in the last quarter in which he would expect to discover it. It is easy to show him how extremely disagreeable it is to be in a position of authority, how very foolish it is to desire authority, how authority, responsibility, is in every form to be shunned, how it is much pleasanter in everything to be the underdog. The wild bull or the wild boar, who can envy his lot? Even the male, that queer expression of the masculine pride of the race, is it worth being him? It is not difficult to show that he, if he is poor, is no great shakes, is poor white trash, and any woman, let alone a child, is better off than he is. The child, not yet a part of real life, still in a sheltered tutelage, is the ideal, of course. To be a sweetmeat sucking, joke cracking, indolently thumbs up or thumbs down member of the audience, is surely better than being a gladiator, that should be evident enough. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, and so on, who could, without dying, avoid it, and instead luxuriously watch other people sweating and dying? No one but would assent to that. Then, says the patentee of the means of evasion, I will show you how you can just step aside and avoid all further labor or anxiety. You will neither be rich, nor great, nor beautiful, nor anything troublesome of that sort. Who wants all that? You can, if you want to, be eternally in the position of a little silent, giggling, crafty child, watching and exploding with pretty tinkling mirth, or of an imbecile that no one takes seriously, and of whom nothing is expected, and in whom there is no ambitious vanity that can be wounded, of whom no martial virtue is expected, nor lover's absurd devotion, with the extravagant claims of the overindulged woman, overestimating her sex leverage. Nothing of all that. Would you like to be a woman? It sounds a come down, but why? She has the best of it. There is always some fool to look after her, she has no harassing anxieties, unless she is a fool herself. She is outside the life of bustle, boring business, mechanical work done to get money, to keep her, war, politics, and all the rest of the solemn rigmarole, almost as much as the child is. That is the gist of the insidious and disgraceful proposal made to man, when in the war of the sexes, turned into a class war, he has been defeated. For the smooth working of the industrial machine some degree of castration of the pugnacious, smally and uselessly, wastefully competitive, European male is necessary. He has been hypnotized, by snobbery, one of his weak points, into carrying out this operation himself. Objectionable as this is to be present at, a sense of the great benefits that must result from it should make it easier to support. If it is best to turn the surplus women into a neuter sex, it is also best to turn all surplus mankind, all the unprogressive mass, into something neuter too, the modern ruler seems to have said. There is nothing to be gained by its being either too masculine or too feminine. As an active competitive mass it can only lead to chaos and annihilation. And the pugnacious free, democratic European through 2 millenniums of unproductive violence, which culturally and in every important way has actually been a retrogression from the human standards of antiquity, for who would today pretend that London or Berlin compares favorably with Periclean Athens? Has proved it beyond all possible dispute. That the male invert, being more womanly than any woman, plus royaliste que la roi, is an unconscious propagandist of feminism is obvious. The modes and incentives of his obsessional life supply the propaganda picture of a feminized universe. Just as the backbone of the Dahomey army consisted of a corps of Amazons, so the backbone of the feminist army in the sex war consists of a corps of exiliti, of active and passive épicènes. Whether or not you regard the sex inversion of man as an act of instinctive revenge on the part of the defeated sex, it is certain that it is to that phenomenon that you have to look for the curious contrast between the technically improved conditions of women, their brilliant display of luxury and taste, in the interests of which armies of people are occupied, and their admitted dissatisfaction with life and disappointment with the results of all this fastidious effort. Millions of women are equipped and appointed, in the matter of toilette and artifices for preserving youth, improving looks, and so forth, in a way that none of the queens of the pre-industrial age can have been. And yet they are not queens, their social influence is less even than that possessed by their grandmothers, and the most seductive toilettes do not, if we are to believe them, madden, as would be expected, the strange male. Why so great cost, having so short a lease, and, it would have in their circumstances to be added, registering such relatively meager returns? In this situation the Exilitos plays his part, a very important social one. His adaptation, and if anything overdone advertisement, of the feminine mind and habits is in a sense the wrong sort of advertisement. In a curious way it is a fashion that originates in a sexlessness, or sex weariness, and at the same time an over-sexing of the organism. And although all the standards of pederastia are feminine standards, women are merely surrounded by so many more women, which is a thing no woman would feel pleased about in the abstract. Contempt for the thing imitated is further a dogma of the male recruits to the female side of the world, and this undercurrent of contempt or hostility, like that of one woman for another, does not help the woman's cause. For evidence of this, contemporary fiction and newspaper articles provide all that is required. I will quote some passages in an article entitled "The Neglected Girl of the Period," from the Sunday Express, written by a lady whose articles are often worth reading on other grounds than that of finding in them an unconscious revelation of the mind of the time. The girl of the period probably appears at her window in striped pajamas, and drops down into the garden to smoke a cigarette or feed her ferret before dressing. But then, poor Cinderella, where is her Meredith? The girl of the period is no less neglected by the painters. Dramatists show the same meanness to girls, the same lack of interest in them, so that across the stage goes a bleak procession of colorless young creatures with no apparent hearts and souls, no sentiment, no ambition. The seriousness of this neglect or degradation of the girl in art depends on whether you regard poetry, painting, and the theater as molding life or merely reflecting it. Personally, I believe that nature copies art. Perhaps girls are having to pay too big a price for their physical prowess, and especially for the infantile freedom of their clothes. The girl of today is so sensibly dressed that she looks like an overgrown child until she is well into her teens, and the muses will have none of her. At the same age, her mother dressed in such a way that she was clearly immature woman, and, as such, had an appealing charm. Girls today look jolly. They have what they call good times. But when you hear anybody say that they are pampered and spoiled, don't believe it. As a matter of fact, the girl of the period is neglected and dethroned.